Welcome everybody to another masterclass. Thank you for attending the first ones. For those who attended, it was really well attended. Had some really good feedback. So I decided rather than waiting till the new year, I'd do another one this Friday. Some of the feedback that I did get, what I've done is I'm going to change the format a little bit. So for the first part of the masterclass, I'm going to talk about being an InfoSec, generally things you need to know about, that kind of thing. For instance, today we're going to be covering kind of like goals and how to set them, and the best way to format it for yourselves so you can sort of progress through your chosen field of security is probably the best way of describing it. The next section, or the second section of the video, is going to be more related to information security and its application in the business world, things that you can do, tips and tricks of the trade, things that I think are important. That way, hopefully, these masterclasses, you can get a bit about what you want to do as an information security professional or an up-and-coming information security professional. And the other bit, some actual tips of actually going through that process and how to apply it within the business world at large, or whichever world you're trying to secure, because it could be pretty much anything at this point. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I have a couple of people who are keeping an eye on that, who are going to point that out to me as and when. Okay, so here we go. So very early on in your career in information security, one of the things I try to mentor people around is making sure that you have your goals set. What do we mean by goals? You hear about this kind of thing a lot when it comes to business, not just business development, but personal development. You know, some of it is tools, yes, Master. But more than anything with your goals, what you're trying to do is to set yourself a bit of a path of how you want to progress your career. It's very easy when you're actually in information security and you start doing it and you start working for your first, company, organization, or when you first start studying, to kind of go down a bit of a rabbit hole. Information security is an extremely wide field as a general rule. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of information that comes pouring out of all kinds of different places and locations and things going on. That sometimes it can get you a little bit muddy in the water when it comes to your career and pushing forward with your career. Yeah, goals are an important aspect. Now, every step of your career that you take should build towards your set of goals. Okay, it's important because when you do get muddied in that water, when you've got information flying at you from all kinds of places, you've got people asking you to do all kinds of things, that when you kind of get maybe a little bit lost in the woods, a little bit lost in the weeds, you kind of sit back and you think, actually, hang on a second, I'm going to sit down and have a look at my goals again. Just let me see if I'm sort of working towards these. And your goals can be anything. You know, your goal could be achieving your CISM. Your goal could be becoming a pen tester. Your goal could be learning Kali Linux. Your goal could be learning about risk management. It could be learning about incident response, intelligence. It could be pretty much anything in this space. And I kind of urge people to set goals for a year, 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years. That's what I was taught to do by John, one of my primary mentors. I just did an interview with him the other day, and he kind of reiterated a lot of what I'm talking to you guys about as part of his interview. So I do urge you to look at that when that goes up. But it's important because, you know, if you're looking to, say, become a consultant, you're going to have to learn a lot of different things about a lot of different areas. you're going to have to learn about, say, I don't know, infrastructure security, defense in depth, what constitutes defense in depth, the OSI model, all these various different aspects. And some of them are going to be longer term goals and some of them are going to be shorter term goals, and your goals don't have to be around your learning process. They can also be around experiences that you want to experience. I want to get involved in cyber warfare frameworks. Okay, that's a very specialized area. You'd probably put that in more of a 5 or a 10-year process than you would necessarily in 1 year. Maybe your first year, 1 year goal is, I want to learn how to program in a new language, or, I want to learn risk management. All of these kind of things are done on different timescales. So when you set your goals, that's kind of how I'd set them. I'd look at them objectively and say, right, what can I achieve in this time scale? What kind of goal is this that we're talking about? And review them regularly. Make sure that they change as you change as well, because your goals in year 1 of you going down this route and your goals in year 10 or in year 5 are going to be very, very different. You might decide you want to become a pen tester, but say 4 years down the line, you actually realize you enjoy being, potentially being a CISO more, or managing governance. That doesn't mean what you've learned before is thrown in the bin. It just adds to your portfolio of knowledge. So when you readjust your goals, there's whole sections that you won't need to learn over again because you've already learned those. So don't feel that you can't change them or amend them or add to them. I mean, if you reach all of your goals in your yearly goal list, add some more. Or maybe you just, once you've achieved that, you want to kind of relax for a little bit, let things simmer a little bit in your mind, and then reset them at the end, and put some new ones in at the end of the year. These are all valid tactics, and they all help you kind of govern where you're going and how you're going to get there. And as I said, every time you feel in a rut, or you're not sure what you're doing or whether the career is right for you, because you do have that from time to time, go back over those goals and just refresh your memory and just recenter yourself as to where you're going. It's exceedingly important to keep your direction. And another good one is look for mentors in the areas that you want to learn. I'm obviously giving masterclasses, but I can only go to a certain level of depth. If you want to learn more about psychology, find somebody who knows a lot about psychology. Find a mentor in that space who can fill in gaps from what you're reading, Googling, whatever. Maybe you're learning some of it through YouTube videos. Find a mentor in that space. You'd be surprised what skill sets people actually have in this space. I put a lot of stock in psychology, so that's a good one to find. Find somebody who knows NLP. Strangely enough, there's a whole section of InfoSec people who have studied neuro-linguistic programming, and relationship management and communication and that kind of thing as well. And they're always willing to share. I think this is one of the things that you'll find in this community over some others. Yes, there are egos in there. There are always going to be egos in every single community of people. Maybe kind of keep those to the side, but a good one is to find people who are willing to kind of speak to you and advise you and help you learn through your path as well, because the community of people out there in InfoSec are really open. They might not give you all the details. So if you're talking, say, to somebody about an attack pattern that they've experienced, they may not tell you who they are. They may not give you some of the details of which organization experienced this, because obviously we've got to be careful what we say sometimes. Nobody wants necessarily the organization they work for to get into trouble for experiencing a problem. But they will tell you what happened and delete what's appropriate. And they'll tell you how they fixed it. We are a very good community for doing that. And one of the lamentations that a lot of us information security professionals have who've been around for a while is that this community isn't more open in its ability to communicate issues that we're all experiencing. As I said before, businesses don't like to admit they've had a breach. But there's a lot of InfoSec people out there who would want to know so they can protect their own organizations from that kind of breach. So sometimes, you know, reaching out to individuals that you know, and you will develop a good community of people that you know with all kinds of different talents. You can't master everything. But at the same time, you know, if you have a friend, I have a friend who's a fantastic pen tester. He works for me, a really good guy. I know he's listening at the moment. But whenever there's anything pen testing wise, I go to him. Do I know about pen testing? Yeah, I've been dealing with it for 25 years on and off. I even did a bit of it and got my certified ethical hacker many, many years ago. But is it something I would do now? No, my knowledge is desperately old. Doesn't mean it's not useful. But, you know, he helps me when it comes to pen testing. You know, John, I mentioned him, John Kerr, quite a few times. He still mentors me even now. Is he actively mentoring me like he did back in the day? No, because I don't work with him anymore. But he's always telling me about new stuff that's coming out. We have conversations, you know, and he helps me set the goals of where I want to go as an information security professional. I mean, I'm 25 years down the line and I've achieved a lot of my goals. A lot of those did change, but it's important to have somewhere that you want to get to, because if you don't have somewhere you want to get to, it's going to be the scattergun approach, and you're just going to find it far more difficult to you know, reach the level that you want to reach. And there's a lot of different levels that you can get to. So that's kind of a bit about setting goals. As I said, you know, good idea to set some. It's a good idea to follow them. It's a good idea to review them on a regular basis. And when you get to your goal, give yourself a little reward. Go for a pizza, go for a pint, you know, celebrate the fact that you've got the certification with some of your peer groups, some of the people around you. You know, as I said before, most people in this community are pretty good. If you achieve a CISM, and you say, oh, I just got my CISM, you're going to have a lot of people congratulating you, even on LinkedIn. You know, if you do it over Twitter, you might get a bit more of an interesting response. But, you know, we're all pleased to see information security people reach their goal, because ultimately we're all in that same space. We all understand the challenges in it. We've all experienced some of the ups and some of the downs. So, you know, don't feel that you can't publicize it. And then once, as I said, once you've reached to that particular goal, there's always another goal to reach. Okay, so let's get to some meat and bones. Many of you are going to be going forward in your career to secure an organization. Now, sometimes you're going to be walking into an organization that's been established for a long period of time. Sometimes you'll be going into an organization which is still in startup mode and may only have been operating for a couple of months, maybe a year, maybe slightly longer. Maybe they don't know anything about security. Maybe they have a vested interest in security. There are all kinds of different sort of scenarios and organizations that you're going to be getting involved with over various different parts of your career. Now, I've met some people who have this kind of method of securing that they follow every single time. They follow their methodology, and that's how they do it. For me, when securing a business, the first thing I need to learn about is the culture of the organization. Who are they? What are they doing? What is their business area? Now, obviously, some of the things like the business area are pretty easy to figure out just by looking at the website. Sometimes finding out the culture behind the business is a little bit more complex. You kind of have to be on the inside. And one of the first things you do when you go into an organization is you really kind of sit down and say, right, what's it like here? What's the culture here? What's the, you know, is it a very open culture? Is it very closed culture? Is there a culture of secrecy? Is there gatekeeping? There's all kinds of different things that make up an organization, but finding out the DNA behind the organization, about the people there, the personalities, what's the viewpoint. Cultures tend to develop over time. So the younger the company is, the less likely it is to have an established culture. The older the organization is, the more established that culture is. Now, on one side of the fence with a culture that hasn't been established within an organization, change is relatively easy to do. It's relatively quick to do. And as long as you communicate it in the right way and you don't tread on any particular toes, you can get security ingrained into that organization in a much easier, more efficient way than you could with somebody with a culture that's very well established. Your tactic in an organization where there's an established culture needs to be very different. Quite often in established organizations, I worked for an organization that was over 100 years old, a very well-known name. You look on my LinkedIn, you could probably figure out which one it is because it's on there. And they had a culture that was extremely complex and extremely difficult to get into. You were either part of the established elite or you were not part of the established elite. So anytime you wanted to make any change, and they don't come from a time period where security was definitely not on the top 10 list of things that they wanted to do as an organization. Now, maybe that's changed. Excuse me. But you have to kind of ingrain yourself in. You have to understand what that culture is. So when you do start making changes, you're doing it in a way in line with their culture, which isn't going to break anything. Because if you go against the culture of an organization, you're very quickly going to come loggerheads with people who aren't going to want to do stuff. They're not going to want to implement something. They're not going to want to have a new policy or a procedure. It becomes really, really difficult to get anything done. And you can be seen as a blocker. You can be seen as a pain in the butt. You can be seen as somebody that nobody wants to talk to, because every time you do talk to them, you're always telling them something is wrong, or something needs to change. People can be quite resistant to change. People in security and IT tend to be a lot better, because we need to update and we need to modify what we're doing on a regular basis, especially in things like IT. So change in an IT department tends to be easier, as long as you don't step on people's toes. But you need to learn what that culture is, and you need to figure out a way to communicate inside that culture so they can see that you're not trying to change the way things are. Once you kind of figured out the culture of the business, you need to really understand the business goals, okay? Now, some of you may be looking at me and saying, when talking about security here, why is this important? Within security, you can make changes to an organization that dramatically change the way they work. As I kind of mentioned when I was just talking about culture, if you do it in the wrong way that goes against the business goals of the business, you are going to meet some serious resistance, to the point where I've known people who've been removed from organizations because they've seen as a barrier to actually letting the company do what it's always done. Now, as an information security professional, hopefully you've got a similar kind of viewpoint. Things must and always will change. And just because something is good now doesn't mean it's going to be good in a month, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Hence why I talk about changing goals on a regular basis, or at least reviewing them. But to a lot of other professions, especially things like accounting, change occurs in accounting. Maybe the HMRC rules change, but as a general rule, a lot of the principles behind what they do and how they do it doesn't really change a great deal. Maybe an accountant would disagree with me with that one. There's a lot of laws that change that they need to be well up on. I do get that, but the basic principles behind accounting doesn't change. Legal, similar kind of thing. Laws change. Situations change. Something that was legal then becomes illegal. But the basic principles, how you portray yourself and how you manage yourself in your profession, doesn't really change that much. In InfoSec, and if you're here, that's where you're getting into and want to get into, you are going to have to experience change a great deal. So when you're communicating what needs to change, understanding those business goals will allow you to align what you want changed in line with the business goals and give a good reason why you want to make that change, because you're aligning it with one of the goals of the business. That way, when you're communicating to the establishment, the C-suite, whoever you're advising, preferably somebody in the C-suite, they can see that you are trying to better and push that business towards its business goal by securing something. Now, what do I mean by that? Once you know the culture and once you know the business goals, you can then start looking at identifying the corporate assets. That includes revenue streams, by the way. So maybe the corporate asset is a group of individuals. Good example, newspaper. Some of the key assets of that newspaper are going to be the journalists. So one of the assets you're going to be protecting is those journalists. Maybe one of the assets is a particular solution. Maybe it's a service provider who provides cloud environments to third parties to generate its money, to generate its revenue. That is an asset. That solution is an asset. So you are securing that solution. Asset-based security is really, really primarily important because it's easy to align to a business goal, okay? And once you align that asset to that business goal and you're communicating it efficiently and effectively, business people will look at you hopefully favorably. It doesn't always occur, I'd like to point out. But on the whole, if what you're telling them is in line with their business goals or protecting their business goals or their assets that they view as an asset, that's the other important thing, then you're going to get a much better response. And then if you communicate in line with the culture of the organization, you've got the golden three all sorted. And it's very hard for anybody outside your profession who is in that organization to disagree with you. They may not be able to make that change quickly. Maybe they've got no budget. Maybe some of the solutions that you've assessed as an asset are ancient servers that desperately need to be rebuilt and then redeveloped because there's a whole proprietary solution that's been developed, say, 10 years ago to cater for the business needs of that time. Also quite important, when you're looking at the corporate assets, look at projects that are occurring to those key assets. Companies, as a general rule, change over time by updating their services, their portfolio, their revenue streams, and their assets. So make sure that when you align and you understand those corporate assets, you understand what projects are going on behind the scenes and get involved with those as early on as possible. Advise the project managers, and this is something to remember as well. As an information security professional, you are an advisor, okay? You are advising them what to do. Nobody's going to thank you if you go in barreling what changes are going to be made and that you're going to make them. You go in and you advise them, okay? One of the quick things easy to do once you understand that culture and those business goals and you understand what the corporate assets are is where they kind of portion security and information security, business security, however you want to term it. You can scale it on a 1 to 10, you can scale it on a 1 to 100, however you want to do it. How do they view security? If they see security as a blocker and a pain to initiate and only something they want to do for a tick box exercise on their priority list, it's going to be very bloody low, okay? So you're going to be in for a bit of a tough time. Doesn't mean you can't change their mindset and raise it up in their esteem, but it's going to take you a little bit longer and you're going to have to do a little bit more hearts and minds. If security is a primary thing for them, maybe they're a service provider and one or two companies in their industry have experienced a particular incident and they're scared of that incident. Their security impetus is going to be higher. So understand where it is at any one time. It can rise and it can fall, okay? Once you've kind of established what their appetite is, and that's what you're going to hear some information security people, if you look at other YouTube videos or read some of the stuff, is then you're gonna find, you know, easier ways to communicate what you want to get to do to the establishment, because you understand the culture, you understand the business goals, you've already assessed which assets are important to them as a business and to you, because that's what you're there to do, and what their appetite is for security, or appetite is for risk, which is the other thing. Now, I'm not going to talk about risk today, because that is one very, very, very long and involved conversation. But I will probably cover it on another masterclass. Every masterclass we do, by the way, is going to be something very, very different. We're going to cover different subject matters. We may go back to other subject matters as well if they're particularly large or they're particularly complex. Maybe we'll have to do 1 or 2 sessions over it. Or if you guys want a bit more information going forward, we can pull back a bit. But yeah, you know, new things every week or every 2 weeks, as far as I can kind of do. Okay. Another key thing to learn when you're going in for the first time and you're experiencing the business is key players in your business. Who are the key players? Who are the ones that have influence within the environment? Who are important key people to know about? What's important? Who has the say? Who has access to the budget? It may be people you didn't realize, okay? Who's involved in what? Who's already involved in security? Who are going to be your key people who have security support over who don't want to engage, don't want to get involved? It's important to know who the key figures are. And for those who are supportive of security, be supportive to them. Help them reach their goals, because they will help you, and you will need it in reaching yours, okay, which is to secure that environment and secure that organization. Find out who are the main blockers and do hearts and minds with them. Try to get in with them, you know, in with them. That's probably not the right term, but, you know, get to understand what their problems are. Try and help them out with their problems. And then you may actually find they go from not supporting security and saying that it's pain for them to deal with, to actually being some of your best supporters. Maybe they've had bad InfoSec people who've come in and tried to enforce the rule of law or enforce security on a group of people who don't want to be secure in the way that, you know, this individual has been trying to force them to. And it kind of leaves a bad taste in their mouth. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of good tax people out there, you know, tax inspectors who are really nice people. But the general view on tax, you know, tax people is very, very low because people have always experienced horror and trouble from dealing with them. Maybe there's some out there who will actually help you get through the whole process, describe where you went wrong so you can do it right in the future without charging you vast quantities of money. You know, you don't want to be that second type of person when it comes to security. You want to be the first type. Okay, so you've had a bad experience with security. What was your experience? What did you find that went horribly wrong? How can I be different in the way that I communicate to you to get my goals, which is to secure the organization and its assets, that isn't going to upset you horribly? You'll be surprised. People can be kind of candid. They can be downright insulting at times, but that's why you've got to have a bit of a thick skin in InfoSec, and you just got to let that water roll off your back, really. Key players are your gateway to getting done what you need to get done. Because again, you've got the culture, you've got the business goals, you've got the assets. You see where we're going with this one. You understand their appetite for risk or appetite for security. And you also know the key players in the business. You can really start to formulate what we call your defense in depth, which is a whole other masterclass in itself. you need to be able to support security in all of its forms. One of the quick and easy ways I've found of getting support with security in any culture is to kind of be open to questions from individuals about things that concern them. It sounds silly, doesn't it? But I made a lot of headway over the years with individuals who were not supportive of security, but have experienced something in their own lives that has scared the bejesus out of them. And people tend to go to people that they know, even if they don't like them. You know, maybe somebody's credit, their wife's credit card details have been cloned or stolen. Maybe their son has experienced very unwisely sent certain types of pictures to what he thought was a young lady, and they aren't, and they're threatening to ransom. By being an open infosec professional, because you have the skills to help them protect themselves. So by advising those individuals, you are breaking down those barriers and those walls. All of a sudden, you are not that security guy that gives them a bad day. A security person that gives them a bad day every time you walk into a room. You're that security person who's actually told them how to help their son, their daughter, their grandmother, their wife, themselves from something terrible happening to them, or mitigating something that's potentially happening to them at the time, which means the next time you communicate with them, you're not going to be that individual who gives them bad news all the time. You're going to be that individual who genuinely tried to help them out, and they will not forget that. Most of the time, 99% of the time. As you kind of portray this open, honest, warts and all kind of way of talking to people and helping people out, it will go along within your work life very, very well, and it will open up all those doors. You've understood all the different stuff that I've talked about over the course of this. And you're now doing the hearts and minds. You're helping them protect themselves and understanding where you're coming from. Never sell on fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Okay, I cannot tell you how important it is to not be that fear monger. Okay, you're not there to portray fear. You're there to identify security issues and come up with solutions to meet those potential issues down the line. Okay, very important. One thing you should always do, he says, looking at his notes, whenever you're doing this, whenever you're assisting in projects, whenever you're assisting in securing an organization, be visual about it. This is more protecting you than necessarily the company. And when I say be visual about it, don't be visual about it outside of your organization, inside your organization. Have it be seen that you are actively working towards protecting the environment. Don't do the ego thing and run around saying, look, I'm fantastic because I've secured this. No one's going to thank you for that. If anything, they're all going to look at you and go, oh God, here he goes. What I'm talking about is make sure that security countermeasures you put in are understood by people, it's seen by the relevant people sort of higher up in the food chain, and that you continue to do that. In the early days of my career, I spent a lot of time doing a lot of security that was just behind the scenes, quietly protecting people. And nobody ever saw what I was doing, so they assumed I was doing nothing. I was doing a lot, but my security was being put in a way that would never affect them. And that's fine, and that's good, but you need to let it be known that that's what you're doing. Otherwise, when a downturn in the economy comes and people start looking at who do we need to cull from the organization, security people, if they've been doing their job properly, unfortunately, are usually quite close to the top of that list, or historically they were. It's a bit different now because they're viewed as not doing anything. Same with IT. I've said to people before, why do our IT department sit around and do nothing? And I've said, well, that's what you want them to do, because if they're not sitting around and looking relaxed and japing with one another and just getting on with their day-to-day work, if they're running around looking scared, looking annoyed, looking confused, it normally means something really bad is about to happen or is happening at the time, and it's going to stop people from operating the way that they want to operate. Same thing with security people in to a certain extent. Be visual in what you're doing. Let people understand what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, what the benefits are to whatever it is you're doing. That way, you're not going to be viewed as, well, that person just sits in the corner and, well, what are they securing? Because I don't see any of it. See it and people will believe it. So let them see it. Okay. As I mentioned, don't be a blocker. If somebody in the business comes to you and says to you, I want to do this, even if you think it's a legendarily bad idea, don't immediately say no. Okay. Look at what it is they're looking to do and try to figure out at least 3 ways to secure something. Okay. Magic number is 3. I kind of mentioned it in the last masterclass. For some reason, psychologically speaking, the magic number is usually 3. Sometimes people surprise you. But if somebody comes to you and says, I've got a new product, this is what it does. It's a new web application. It needs to go live in 6 weeks' time. So I can't have any stopping on the trajectory of our project plan. But I've just been told I need to get your sign off on it. So I've come to you to say, I need your sign off. Don't just turn around and say, well, I'm not going to sign it off unless you secure it. And I'm not going to sign it off unless you have a pen test, unless there's a security architectural review, a code review, insert numbers of tools and products and what have you that we're going to put in to make sure that everything's secure, blah, 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 and all the rest of it. You could do that. You're not going to get thanked for it. So what you do is you say, right, okay, here we go. So you've got a new project. It's going live. I've got a 6-week time scale to secure it. Let me have a look at what you have. You have a look at it. You have a look at the component parts of it. You figure out, is it corporate asset? You do a bit of kind of investigation into what it's there to achieve. And you try to come up with 3 different solutions in securing it. Maybe you come up with one that's a short-term thing to get it past the line so people can then sign off on it, or you're happy to sign off on it, with agreement that the midterm options that you put in place are at least considered afterwards, and then maybe have another 3 options for securing it in the midterm. And then long-term, you create a set of goals similar to what you've done with your career on how you're going to secure it on a long-term basis, so you can start working on that. That is a good way of answering somebody who's come to you and said, I've been told I need security sign off for my development project. Rather than turning around and saying, well, you're going to have to impress me to get sign off in 6 weeks' time. It's not the way to do it. You just sit down, you work through it with them. You figure out what they're capable of doing based on, do I need to go through the list again? Culture, business objectives, so on and so forth. Okay. That magic 3 number is so important. Risk management. I've kind of already mentioned it. Get to understand risk management and how it's done. Once you've understood all those other aspects of the business and their projects and the culture and so on and so forth and their risk appetite, time for you to start looking at doing some risk management. This is going to be your main tool in the early days and going forward of getting budget to maybe secure environments, okay, to secure the business, to protect the business from loss or from potential loss, okay. Risk management is one of the key aspects of information security in 95% of our disciplines. Understand that there is quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative is related to the costings, the figures, the numbers. So when you're talking to people about quantitative risk management, you're talking to them about, this is how much it will cost to fix it, but it will protect you from this amount of probable loss or likely loss, okay? There's a lot in it. And as I said, risk management is going to be a whole other thing, but just briefly going over it. Qualitative risk management is where you're maybe talking to somebody in the IT department. They don't care about the numbers. The numbers they kind of care about, but they probably just don't give us stuff. Numbers, financial department will care. The C-suite will care. The purse string owner will care, like the project manager, whoever's got that budget. But the qualitative is what defines that risk and why that risk is important. And you can combine the two. There are methodologies out there. Watch out for probability factors. Again, we'll cover that in another masterclass, but probability factors are normally the ones that will trip you up, because what's probable for me may be very different in probability factors to you or to Dave or to Jane or to other people. You know, you get 10 people in a room and you say, how probable is this going to occur? And pretty much 95% of these people are going to come up with different figures unless they start discussing it and agreeing between two sides. People like to agree with one another in the group collective. So just bear that in mind when it comes to risk management. But risk management is a key aspect of any information security profession, because quite often, say, for instance, if you're a pen tester, you get asked, okay, you've told me about this vulnerability, but what's the risk? Well, what's the risk you're talking to me about? Okay, this vulnerability exists, but what's the risk that's going to be realized? What's the risk behind it? You need to know whether they're talking, you know, the quantitative side, the qualitative side, and how to communicate that. So we go back to communication again. Plus, obviously, when you do communicate it, you need to understand the culture, the business goals, the asset you're talking about, and the people that you're talking to, and so on and so forth. My final piece before we go into question time, because I'm looking at the time, security that you put in should never, ever disable the business from doing what it needs to do what it does. Okay, generating revenue is usually one of the main business goals. Anything you do from a security standpoint needs to support that business from doing what it's doing. If you put too much security into an environment because you have this standardized way of doing it, and this kind of brings it all the way back to the beginning, and your standardized way is very, very high end on the security, which is awesome because you've got high levels of security. But if it stops the business from doing what it's doing and what it needs to do what it does, you're going to get fired. You're going to get booted out. No one's going to respect you. Okay. So when you're looking at your security countermeasures based on the culture of the business, so on and so forth, make sure you're not putting anything in front of them that looks like it's going to disable the business. If they're doing something contrary to, say, compliance, or they're doing something that is technically illegal, it does happen, communicate that to them. Fair enough. Okay. Maybe that will stop them from doing something they shouldn't be doing in the first place anyway. But on the normal course of things, just make sure you anything security wise that's going to disable you from the business from doing what it needs to do to survive. Make sure you discount that and put that to one side. Look for other options. There's always plenty of ways to skin a cat. Find the particular way to skin that cat and deal with that issue in a way that doesn't disable people from doing what they need to do. Okay, that's the quickest and easiest way to get booted out the door. And I've seen plenty of security people do that, especially in the early days. Those people don't usually work in security anymore, or they bounce around a lot. You don't want to be that kind of person. So there we are. That kind of covers what I do when I first walk into a new business. I don't know it. Every business is different. Every culture is different. Okay, there are some similarities. If you're going into a software development firm, you know, you're probably going to come across similar kind of mindsets on a regular basis from if you go into a cloud computing firm, or if you're going into a financial firm, or you're going into a manufacturing firm. Every single type of business is different. Everyone has a culture. Everyone has different goals. Yes, there will be similarities, but always understand what you're securing before you start securing it. Doesn't mean you can't do some sort of like short-term stuff to get some quick wins in. That's great. Normally, people are bringing you in for a reason because they've got an existing problem that they're trying to solve right now, be it compliance or whatever problem. But, you know, deal with those, but look objectively at how the business runs and how it works and its goals and its key assets, and get all of that down before you start designing your strategy. Okay. It's very key to understand that. And it's not a 5-minute process. Give yourself time, be visual in what you're doing, good in your advisories, but make absolutely certain you've got exactly down how the business works, how it's structured, key players, and don't forget third parties as well. That's getting even more important. But anyway, I'm going to open up the floor for questions. So let's have a look. What areas would you advise to give good grounding in security to remain a generalist before you decide to specialize? Ooh, that's a good one, Jamie. I presume that's from somebody watching. So
I mean, Jim, I was just, sorry, Jamie here. I was just basically confirming that you've mentioned obviously now risk. So when you're setting your goals, what kind of areas should you potentially focus on when starting your career? I mean, risk is obviously a good grounding in all security, but potentially what other areas could possibly be a good place to start?
Okay, so I covered a couple of them in the previous masterclass, but it's worthwhile identifying early on when you're looking at your goals. Key areas you're not good in. Okay, if you're not a good communicator, learn communication. There are techniques. Chris Voss is brilliant. Look up Chris Voss. Can't remember the name of his book offhand. I think it's The Art of Negotiation. Brilliant book. You may think you're a good communicator, and you probably are a good communicator, but there are techniques that you can do to things like negotiate with people and so on and so forth. Recognize early on where your holes lie. If you don't know much about psychology, you don't know much about narcissistic personality disorder, or, any stuff like that, you're going to meet a lot of those types of people in your career, especially if you're dealing with business owners. Understand how to deal with it, understand what it is, get to know what it is, but set goals as well and say, right, I'm going to learn about NLP. I'm going to learn about comms. I'm going to learn about how to write a report. I might think I know how to write a report, but let me look at some effective report writers and learn from their mistakes and learn what they've said. Okay. Other things, risk management, definitely. Incident response, okay? This is another key one. And again, I'll cover this in another masterclass. Incident response is what happens when something goes wrong. You are never going to put in so much security that something is never going to go wrong. Something at some point is going to go wrong. A disaster is going to occur. You're going to have disaster recovery and people used to laugh. When we used to use a pandemic as a disaster recovery thing, they're not laughing anymore because we've now experienced what it is. So the learning incident response and how to deal with it. But there's two types of incident response to remember to learn. One is general incident response. Okay. An event has occurred, the who, the what, the where, the why, the how, so on and so forth, how to document it, how to band-aid it, how to fix it, how to deal with it, and how to do the lessons learned afterwards. Okay. The second type of incident response, which I hope none of you will ever have to go through, I have, and it's not fun and it's not pleasant, is where you have to get the authorities involved because somebody has done something illegal or they're currently doing something illegal. Those are two different types of incidents, and they're treated and handled in two very different ways. One, you're fixing quickly whatever has gone wrong or whatever incident has kicked off and you're recovering. The second one has a whole plethora of stuff as part of that incident response where you're not going to be doing anything but preserving the evidence. Okay, so get to understand incident response, and we'll do a whole session on that at some point. Incident response is really, really important. Intelligence, where to get the knowledge that you need for your security space at the moment. RSS feeds. Your goal maybe would be to be a podcaster. Here you go. Sat in front of one. So study podcasters. Don't study information security, because hopefully you'll know that when you get to the point where you're sat in front of the mic. But learn how to do the podcasting, whilst you're doing the security stuff. Find ones that you like to listen to, and then go and learn from them, and then apply it. If you want to become a CISO, there's a whole set of skills involved in being a CISO, comms being one of the most primary ones, but understanding what people are coming to you with, maybe from a security architectural point of view. If you're very strong in governance, but you find yourself lacking in technical, get involved in projects where you're going to get involved with the technical side. Not gone, but, there's IT people out there who can do the IT aspects of security very, very well, who can build you a firewall rule set, who can build you firewalls, who can, secure routers, secure, VLANs, whatever it may well be. Probably better than a lot of other security people. But as security people, knowing what you need is important. So understanding what that technology is, how that technology is secured, and engaging with those IT people. And the cool thing about engagement with people is another thing. If you're working with them and you're valuing their input, then you're building a relationship with them. So in future, when you deal with projects together, they're going to look at you as a security person and say, well, I know he gives me some really good ideas. He wouldn't know how to set up a firewall for toffee, but he knows how a firewall rule set is set. He knows what he's looking at when it comes to that kind of thing. He might not understand network address translation or adapters or DMZs or how, things go in DMZs and all the rest of it. But he does know his firewall rule set. So let's sit down with him and work it out what he wants of it. So never split the difference. Negotiating if your life depended on it. That's the best. That's a really cool book to get. I've got the audio book. I listen to it on a regular basis just to puff myself back into what I need to know. But yeah, generalism in security, incident response, risk management, communication, psychology, the written word, know how policies are written. The amount of policies I see that are written badly, that have should or could in them. No shoulds or coulds. Policies are absolutes. You will do this. You won't do this. If there's any shoulds or coulds in, it leaves openness. And what is a policy? Why is a policy there? We'll cover that in another masterclass. Policy, in very short terms, is there to give you a set of instructions, give the reader a set of instructions, what is allowed and what is not allowed. And always have at the end, if you need to contravene this policy because of some business reason to do so, communicate that to us and we'll give you dispensation. Give them a methodology to say, I know you said I'm not allowed to look at porn, for instance, but I'm a software developer who has just got a client who's a porn site. So I kind of need to do that. It sounds silly. It has actually happened in the past with a software, with a web developer that I worked with for quite a while. Great guys, but yeah, that was an interesting policy exception that they requested, but it does happen. Is there any good books or resources that are good for learning methodology to deal with incidents? There's a lot of books about incident response out there. Have I come across one that is the be all and end all? No, I don't think I ever have. Lots of them have good ideas. I think probably the best thing to do actually is to buy books based on events that have occurred. Hacking, there's actually quite a big set of various different books on, how this hack occurred or how this cyber warfare occurred. There's a whole host of various different books out there on Amazon or wherever you want to go. Study incidents that have occurred and work out ways to develop a process to handle the flavors of that incident. No incident ever occurs in the same way. You can write a playbook about how to deal with somebody hacking your website. But if you make it too exact in the method that they use to get in, it's not going to be easily transferable to other types of attacks. You can boil it back a little bit and make it a playbook on how to deal with somebody hacking your website. Maybe with little sections in there to say, if it's a SQL injection, then here's some things to keep an eye on, or things to look at, within your playbook, so on and so forth. I love studying incidents that have occurred and working out ways of how I would have dealt with them. I find that eminently more useful than reading books on incident response. If you're learning about how the criminal world works, you can go and read books on how the criminal world works, but you're better off actually going and reading a book about a particular type of crime lord or crime boss or mafia boss and what he did. How did he get where he is? What did he do? There's loads of really good podcasts out there that explain people who've been in that game. There's some really good ones out there about hackers and what it's like to be in there. This is why I like the Conti tapes, because now I know how they work. I can apply roughly what I've learned there to pretty much any similar type of group. So when I create my playbook, so I build myself an idea of how I do my incident response. The format doesn't change, but the way you handle incidents does. And that's why there's things called playbooks and incident response policies and procedures. Is there any general advice about incidents and not destroying potential evidence or forensics? Yes, you're probably going to need to read the rules around handling of evidence from a legal perspective. There's like different processes that police or investigators or detectives need to follow, certain things that they need to do to preserve evidence. And a lot of it is about preservation of evidence or the chain of evidence, because, at the end of the day, if you're getting involved in something where you believe somebody has used some of your technology, like say a laptop, to break in and steal something, you probably aren't going to be looking at it yourself. You're probably going to be getting a specialist forensics person in. So you won't need to, unless it interests you in becoming a forensics person, you won't need to know the tools that they need to use to do what they do, but you will need to know that if a laptop has been used, then you secure that laptop and you store it away and you keep track of who that laptop has come into contact with. If you're going to, the same thing, if you're going to dust for prints in an environment where somebody has stolen, say, I don't know, a gold bar, if you've got people going in and putting their fingers all over the place where the gold bar was sitting, you're just going to end up with a lot of fingerprints, So you prevent people from accessing that solution until the trained forensics people can come in, do what they need to do, take their images, take away the location, take away the evidence. Or if you're bringing in the police, allowing them to come into the environment, walling it off, making sure nobody goes into that environment. That's commonly the stuff that you would need to do. If you want more information on it, exactly how it's done, I might be able to get a friend of mine actually to give some additional advice. He's a forensics guy. Maybe I'll bring him on, see if he'll come on for the masterclass and give you guys a little bit of hints of what he does and how he does it. Depends whether he's camera shy or not. Advice on security communities to be a part of and finding a mentor. Mentors can come from different places. They can come from people you work with, people you work for, friends in the industry. You can seek out a mentor. I've mentored tons of people over the years, many students who found some of my early day articles. They wanted access to my articles because apparently you've got to pay for it, even though I never get paid for the fact that they've got my articles stored. And they say to me, "Oh, can I have your article?" I go, "Yeah, here's the article." I then give that to them, and quite often they will say, "Well, it's actually for my thesis, or it's actually forming the basis of some of my work. Would it be possible for you to look at it?" Yeah, of course. Yeah. As I said before, most InfoSec people are generally nice people, and they like the fact that people are asking them for advice. So you will be able to get something out of them. But security communities, it depends what you're doing. I mean, I've been involved in the Cybersecurity Forum Initiative for years and years and years. Now, they're a group of individuals who deal with cyber warfare and national security for the US government. Even though I'm British, I got involved in the community really, really early. And I met some brilliant people out there, and have been involved in some of the projects that they do. It's a very worthwhile environment. You will get a lot of mentors actually from working within communities. I'd shy away from communities where it's obviously a community of people that somebody set up to just sell their products. I don't like that kind of thing. You know, you go to some of the information security communities on LinkedIn, and it's pretty much just salespeople coming in and trying to convince you to buy their product. You want to kind of shy away from that. But you know, there used to be people like the Jericho Forum and so on and so forth. I don't know if they're still around, but CSFI, good example. They're a good one to get involved with. I've spoken to all kinds of people from all kinds of walks of life from that kind of community. LinkedIn is good, but just go in, look at the community that you think might be good for you, see whether it's actually communicative or whether it's full of people with massive egos or salespeople trying to sell you stuff, and then leave and find another one. Eventually, you'll find a good community of people. It was a little bit easier maybe 10 years ago than it is now. But, you know, this is a community. The fact that you're all here still watching what I'm doing, you're a community of people. Reach out, you know. You can communicate with me, you can communicate with any member of my team, or, you know, you could create a masterclass group yourself and add the people who want to be added in there, and then talk about some of what we're talking about. I'd even join that, and if you want additional advice, I'd be happy to do that. So have a think. But yeah, you know, if you can't find a community of, you know, to be a part of, create one. Just safeguard who comes in. I'm not saying gatekeep everybody, but you know, if people start trying to sell you their products in it, just boot them out. You know, create the community and just bringing people to be a part of it. And people will naturally join it as well. You know, if you're, good example, if you're a veteran trying to get into InfoSec and you've joined a community of veterans, create somewhere on LinkedIn for you know, veterans getting into information security. Invite those people from that veterans community to be a part of the security veterans community. So maybe it's focused. That way we can give advice directly to the people who want it. Just make sure, obviously, no salespeople come in. I love salespeople, I want to point out. Just, you know, you don't want them selling in your community and in your environment. Any other questions? We're reaching the top end of the time that we have together. I'm available for one last question if anyone has got one. Okay, just received one on a DM. What's the strangest culture you've ever encountered? Oh my, there's been so many. I once did security, or I assisted in the development of a security for a well-known porn channel. Yeah, that was an eye-opener, because all the normal stuff that you would put in place, security-wise, especially with appropriate use of technology, went completely out the window. You know, I'm not sure if they still exist anymore, in all honesty. Maybe they've been snapped up, a lot of them did, but it was, for me, it was just another organization that wanted security. They had specific security related to, obviously physical security was a really big thing for them because of what they were producing. There was a lot of insider concerns as well, because there was a lot of movement of people from one business to another business, and it was a time when that type of television channel was quite popular. There was a lot of them. I think there still is a lot of them. I don't know. I don't really hang around in that community, but yeah, you get to see a lot of eye-opening material. You get to see a lot of stuff happening in the studios when you're going in to do the security. And when you're writing your appropriate use policies, you're going to be removing certain things that you would normally put in an appropriate use policy completely out the window. And it's a whole different mindset. It's a whole different culture. It's a whole different set of objectives. So, you know, it's a good example of a culture or an organization that operates so differently from any other organization you've ever worked with. But hey, you know, they're a business like anyone else. Do I agree with it? Do I not agree with it? That's immaterial as far as I'm concerned. I'm a security person. If you put me into an area that I need to secure, I'm there to secure it. I don't care, you know, what the details are behind it. As long as it's legal and as long as no one's getting hopefully hurt, you know, I won't deal with cyber warfare. I don't deal with warfare. Cyber warfare I have in the past, but warfare where people are getting genuinely hurt, I won't deal with that. But, you know, any other type of business that's legitimate, you know, you're just there to secure it. It's no different from any other business. Right, okay, so that's the end of the second session. It's been an absolute blast to talk to you all again. Thank you very much. Bye all.